Let's suppose your friend, let's call him Tom, is feeling under the weather one day and is asking people for health advice. You suggest that based on his symptoms, Tom should probably go to see a doctor. Another friend of yours, let's call him Stephen, strongly advises Tom against going to see the doctor because the doctor will probably prescribe him synthetic drugs. Stephen suggests that what Tom really needs to do is to take herbal remedies instead. He suggests that they're natural and therefore much better for Tom than all of those synthetic chemicals that big pharmaceutical companies try to sell to the masses. Tom decides that Stephen's advice sounds more compelling than yours. His thinking goes something like as follows. We're products of nature and our bodies are natural biological systems. So it seems to make sense that it would be riskier, all things considered, to introduce synthetic compounds and chemicals instead of naturally occurring ones. Unfortunately, in the case of both Stephen and Tom, they would have succumbed to what is known as the appeal to nature fallacy. There are several reasons why this kind of perspective is fallacious. Firstly, note that just because something is natural, it doesn't necessarily follow that it is also good. A volcano erupting and causing millions of deaths is not necessarily good, although it is certainly natural. It's easy to think of many such examples, but even when it comes to the idea of toxicity, there are many naturally occurring sources of poison, infection, and contamination that are just as harmful to humans as some of the worst synthetic toxins. Those living in poorer countries are in a constant battle with natural sources of infection and contamination, from fecal matter, waterborne parasites, viruses, bacterial infections, and much, much more. Such people would rightly laugh at the idea that nature is uniformly good for humans. Nature itself is, of course, a double-edged sword, capable of yielding resources that are wonderfully beneficial to human well-being, and others that are detrimental and even potentially fatal. But there is a second reason why the appeal to nature fallacy is a very weak form of argument, and that has to do with the line of reasoning gestured at earlier in Stephen's interaction with Tom. He notes that humans are a part of nature. The problem here is that if you actually accept that premise, then the notion that there is a fundamental distinction between the products of human activity on the one hand and the products of nature on the other begins to break down. After all, if we're wholly a part of nature, then it would seem to follow that the things that we do and create must also themselves be a part of nature. Why are the products of human activity, for example, any less natural than the products of bird activity or bear activity or any other organism for that matter? But even if we reject the idea that humans are a part of nature in the same way as other organisms and structures are, it still does not necessarily follow that human-made artifacts or substances are likely to be worse for us than natural ones. After all, humans typically set out to intentionally design and create artifacts and compounds that are compatible with our natures and constitutions. When we create a new medical treatment, for example, many brilliant minds spend many hours and much care ensuring that it is compatible with our biological constitution. Why then should we expect nature to do any better, which, after all, in most contexts, proceeds and evolves in a manner that is completely indifferent to human well-being? The answer is that we shouldn't. The next question is, why is the appeal to nature fallacy so common? Part of the motivation for some people is no doubt a certain romanticism about the distant past, what is sometimes called primitivism. Primitivism is a kind of idealized but often completely historically inaccurate view that humans lived idyllic, peaceful, harmonious lives before modern civilization came along and precipitated hardship, disease, depression, and many other ailments. Of course, historians and anthropologists have long since shown this romantic view to be largely a fiction. Primitive societies and tribes were often characterized by violence, strife, economic hardship, and disease. This is not to say that they didn't also manifest some good qualities, some of which perhaps we would do well to learn from today. However, the notion that primitive life was uniformly better because it was closer to nature is nothing more than a fanciful myth. Another reason why people are commonly drawn to the appeal to nature fallacy is because they understandably are concerned about the environment and humans' impact on it. Unquestionably, one of the downsides of civilization has been that we have caused significant damage to many natural ecosystems and continue to do so in places. People then seem to feel the need to make a stronger case for environmental protection by creating a simplistic black and white moral fable. Humans equals bad, nature equals good. Of course, this is a silly and unnecessary oversimplification. We don't need to idealize nature in order to have compelling reasons to protect and sustain it. Striking that balance between protecting wildlife and ensuring nature's benefits to humans are sustained, while protecting humans from the dangerous sources and forces in nature, should be our focus. Oversimplifying the narrative will only make it more likely that we enact suboptimal solutions that don't take all concerns and interests into account.